Next comes the European bread, fair enough, good enough after a fashion, but cold and tough and unsympathetic, and never any change, never any variety, always the same tiresome thing. Next, the butter, the sham and tasteless butter, no salt in it, and made of goodness knows what. Then there is the beefsteak. They have it in Europe, but they don't know how to cook it. Neither will they cut it right. It comes on the table in a small, round pewter platter. It lies in the center of this platter, in a bordering bed of grease-soaked potatoes. It is the size, shape, and thickness of a man's hand with the thumb and fingers cut off. It is a little overdone, is rather dry, it tastes pretty insipidly, it rouses no enthusiasm. Imagine a poor exile contemplating that inert thing, and imagine an angel suddenly sweeping down out of a better land and setting before him a mighty porterhouse steak 1.5 inches thick, hot and sputtering from the griddle, dusted with a fragrant pepper, enriched with little melting bits of butter of the most unimpeachable freshness and genuineness, the precious juices of the meat trickling out and joining the gravy, archipelagoed with mushrooms. Township or two of tender, yellowish fat gracing an outlying district of this ample county of beefsteak, the long white bone which divides the sirloin from the tenderloin still in its place. And imagine that the angel also adds a great cup of American homemade coffee, with a cream of froth on top, some real butter, firm and yellow and fresh, some smoking hot biscuits, a plate of hot buckwheat cakes with transparent syrup. Could words describe the gratitude of this exile? The European dinner is better than the European breakfast, but it has its faults and inferiorities. It does not satisfy. He comes to the table eager and hungry, he swallows his soup. There is an undefinable lack about it somewhere. Thinks the fish is going to be the thing he wants, eats it and isn't sure. Thinks the next dish is perhaps the one that will hit the hungry place, tries it, and is conscious that there was a something wanting about it also. And thus he goes on from dish to dish, like a boy after a butterfly which just misses getting caught every time it alights, but somehow doesn't get caught after all. And at the end, the exile and the boy have fared about alike. The one is full, but grievously unsatisfied. The other has had plenty of exercise, plenty of interest, and a fine lot of hopes, but he hasn't got any butterfly. There is here and there an American who will say he can remember rising from a European table d'hôte perfectly satisfied. But we must not overlook the fact that there is also here and there an American who will lie. The number of dishes is sufficient, but then it is such a monotonous variety of unstriking dishes. It is an inane dead level of fair to middling. There is nothing to accent it. Perhaps if the roast of mutton or of beef, a big, generous one, were brought on the table and carved in full view of the client, that might give the right sense of earnestness and reality to the thing. But they don't do that. They pass the sliced meat around on a dish, and so you are perfectly calm. It does not stir you in the least. Now a vast roast turkey, stretched on the broad of his back, with his heels in the air and the rich juices oozing from his fat sides. But I may as well stop there, for they would not know how to cook him. They can't even cook a chicken respectably, and as for carving it, they do that with a hatchet. This is about the customary table d'hôte bill in summer. Soup, characterless. Fish sole, salmon, or whiting, usually tolerably good. Roast mutton or beef, tasteless, and some last year's potatoes. A pate or some other made dish, usually good, considering. One vegetable brought on in state, and all alone, usually insipid lentils or string beans or indifferent asparagus. Roast chicken, as tasteless as paper. Lettuce salad, tolerably good. Decayed strawberries or cherries. Sometimes the apricots and figs are fresh, but this is no advantage, as these fruits are of no account anyway. The grapes are generally good, and sometimes there is a tolerably good peach by mistake. The variations of the above bill are trifling. After a fortnight, one discovers that the variations are only apparent, not real. In the third week, you get what you had the first, and in the fourth, the week, you get what you had the second. 3 or 4 months of this weary sameness will kill the robustest appetite. It has now been many months, at the present writing, since I have had a nourishing meal, but I shall soon have one, a modest, private affair all to myself. I have selected a few dishes and made out a little bill of fare, which will go home in the steamer that precedes me and be hot when I arrive, as follows. Radishes, baked apples with cream. Fried oysters, stewed oysters, frogs. American coffee with real cream. American butter. Fried chicken, Southern style. Porterhouse steak. Saratoga, potatoes. Broiled chicken, American style. Hot biscuits, Southern style. Hot wheat bread, Southern style. Hot buckwheat cakes. American toast, clear maple syrup. Virginia bacon, broiled. Blue points on the half shell. Cherry stone clams. San Francisco mussels, steamed. Oyster soup, clam soup. Philadelphia terrapin soup. Oysters roasted in shell northern style. Softshell crabs, Connecticut shad. Baltimore perch. Brook trout from Sierra Nevadas. Lake trout from Tahoe. Sheephead and croakers from New Orleans. Black bass from the Mississippi. American roast beef. Roast turkey, Thanksgiving style. Cranberry sauce, celery. Roast wild turkey, woodcock. Canvasback duck from Baltimore. Prairie lions from Illinois. Missouri partridges, broiled. Possum coon. Boston bacon and beans. Bacon and greens, Southern style. Hominy boiled onions, turnips. Pumpkin squash, asparagus. Butter beans, sweet potatoes. Lettuce succotash, string beans. Mashed potatoes, catsup. Boiled potatoes in their skins. New potatoes minus the skins. Early rose potatoes, roasted in the ashes, Southern style, served hot. Sliced tomatoes with sugar or vinegar, stewed tomatoes. Green corn, cut from the ear and served with butter and pepper. Green corn on the ear. Hot corn pone with chitterlings, Southern style. Hot hoe cake, Southern style. Hot egg bread, Southern style. Hot light bread, Southern style. Buttermilk, iced sweet milk. Apple dumplings with real cream. Apple pie, apple fritters. Apple puffs, Southern style. Peach cobbler, Southern style. Peach pie, American mince pie. Pumpkin pie, squash pie. All sorts of American pastry. Fresh American fruits of all sorts, including strawberries, which are not to be doled out as if they were jewelry, but in a more liberal way. Ice water, not prepared in the ineffectual goblet, but in the sincere and capable refrigerator. Americans intending to spend a year or so in European hotels will do well to copy this bill and carry it along. They will find it an excellent thing to get up an appetite with in the dispiriting presence of the squalid table d'hôte. Foreigners cannot enjoy our food, I suppose, any more than we can enjoy theirs. It is not strange, for tastes are made, not born. I might glorify my bill of fare until I was tired, but after all, the Scotchman would shake his head and say, "Where's your haggis?" And the Fijian would sigh and say, "Where's your missionary?" I have a neat talent in matters pertaining to nourishment. This has met with professional recognition. I have often furnished recipes for cookbooks. Here are some designs for pies and things, which I recently prepared for a friend's projected cookbook, but as I forgot to furnish diagrams and perspectives, they had to be left out, of course. Recipe for an ash cake. Take a lot of water and add to it a lot of coarse Indian meal and about a quarter of a lot of salt. Mix well together, knead into the form of a pone, and let the pone stand a while, not on its edge, but the other way. Rake away a place among the embers, lay it there, and cover it an inch deep with hot ashes. When it is done, remove it, blow off all the ashes but one layer, butter that one and eat. NB, no household should ever be without this talisman. It has been noticed that tramps never return for another ash cake. Recipe for New English Pie. To make this excellent breakfast dish, proceed as follows. Take a sufficiency of water and a sufficiency of flour and construct a bulletproof dough. Work this into the form of a disc, with the edges turned up some 3/4 of an inch. Toughen and kiln dry in a couple days in a mild but unvarying temperature. Construct a cover for this redoubt in the same way and of the same material. Fill with stewed dried apples, aggravate with cloves, lemon peel, and slabs of citron. Add 2 portions of New Orleans sugars, then solder on the lid and set in a safe place till it petrifies. Serve cold at breakfast and invite your enemy. Recipe for German coffee. Take a barrel of water and bring it to a boil. Rub a chicory berry against a coffee berry, then convey the former into the water. Continue the boiling and evaporation until the intensity of the flavor and aroma of the coffee and chicory has been diminished to a proper degree, then set aside to cool. Now unharness the remains of a once cow from the plow, insert them in a hydraulic press, and when you shall have acquired a teaspoon of that pale blue juice, which a German superstition regards as milk, modify the malignity of its strength in a bucket of tepid water and ring up the breakfast. Mix the beverage in a cold cup, partake with moderation, and keep a wet rag around your head to guard against overexcitement. To carve fowls in the German fashion. Use a club and avoid the joints. Chapter 50. Titian bad and Titian good. I wonder why some things are. For instance, art is allowed as much indecent license today as in earlier times, but the privileges of literature in this respect have been sharply curtailed within the past 80 or 90 years. Fielding and Smollett could portray the beastliness of their day in the beastliest language. We have plenty of foul subjects to deal with in our day, but we are not allowed to approach them very near, even with nice and guarded forms of speech. But not so with art. The brush may still deal freely with any subject, however revolting or indelicate. It makes a body ooze sarcasm at every pore to go about Rome and Florence and see what this last generation has been doing with the statues. These works, which had stood in innocent nakedness for ages, are all fig-leaved now. Yes, every one of them. Nobody noticed their nakedness before, perhaps. Nobody can help noticing it now. The fig leaf makes it so conspicuous. But the comical thing about it all is that the fig leaf is confined to cold and pallid marble, which would be still cold and unsuggestive without this sham and ostentatious symbol of modesty, whereas warm-blood paintings, which do really need it, have in no case been furnished with it. At the door of the Uffizi, in Florence, one is confronted by statues of a man and a woman, noseless, battered, black with accumulated grime. They hardly suggest human beings. Yet these ridiculous creatures have been thoughtfully and conscientiously fig-leaved by this fastidious generation. You enter and proceed to that most visited little gallery that exists in the world, the Tribune, and there, against the wall, without obstructing rag or leaf, you may look your fill upon the foulest, the vilest, the obscenest picture the world possesses, Titian's Venus. It isn't that she is naked and stretched out on a bed. No, it is the attitude of one of her arms and hand. If I ventured to describe that attitude, there would be a fine howl, but there the Venus lies, for anybody to gloat over that wants to, and there she has a right to lie, for she is a work of art, and art has its privileges. I saw young girls stealing furtive glances at her. I saw young men gaze long and absorbedly at her. I saw aged, infirm men hang upon her charms with a pathetic interest. How I should like to describe her, just to see what a holy indignation I could stir up in the world, just to hear the unreflecting average man deliver himself about my grossness and coarseness and all that. The world says that no worded description of a moving spectacle is 100th part as moving as the same spectacle seen with one's own eyes. Yet the world is willing to let its son and its daughter and itself look at Titian's beast, but won't stand a description of it in words, which shows that the world is not as consistent as it might be. There are pictures of nude women which suggest no impure thought. I am well aware of that. I am not railing at such. What I am trying to emphasize is the fact that Titian's Venus is very far from being one of that sort. Without any question, it was painted for a bagnio, and it was probably refused because it was a trifle too strong. In truth, it is too strong for any place but a public art gallery. Titian has two Venuses in the tribune. Persons who have seen them will easily remember which one I am referring to. In every gallery in Europe, there are hideous pictures of blood, carnage, oozing brains, putrefaction, pictures portraying intolerable suffering, pictures alive with every conceivable horror, wrought out in dreadful detail, and similar pictures are being put on the canvas every day and publicly exhibited, without a growl from anybody, for they are innocent, they are inoffensive, being works of art. But suppose a literary artist ventured to go into a painstaking and elaborate description of one of these grisly things, the critics would skin him alive. Well, let it go, it cannot be helped. Art retains her privileges, literature has lost hers. Somebody else may cipher out the whys and the wherefores and the consistencies of it. I haven't got time. Titian's Venus defiles and disgraces the tribune. There is no softening that fact, but his Moses glorifies it. The simple truthfulness of its noble work wins the heart and the applause of every visitor, be he learned or ignorant. After wearying oneself with the acres of stuffy, sappy, expressionless babies that populate the canvases of the old masters of Italy, it is refreshing to stand before this peerless child and feel that thrill which tells you you are at last in the presence of the real thing. This is a human child. This is genuine. You have seen him 1,000 times. You have seen him just as he is here, and you confess, without reserve, that Titian was a master. The doll faces of other painted babes may mean one thing, they may mean another, but with the Moses, the case is different. The most famous of all the art critics has said, "There is no room for doubt here, plainly this child is in trouble." I consider that the Moses has no equal among the works of the old masters, except it be the divine hair trunk of Bassano. I feel sure that if all the other old masters were lost, and only these two preserved, the world would be the gainer by it. My sole purpose in going to Florence was to see this immortal Moses, and by good fortune I was just in time, for they were already preparing to remove it to a more private and better protected place, because a fashion of robbing the great galleries was prevailing in Europe at the time. I got a capable artist to copy the picture. Panamaker, the engraver of Doré's books, engraved it for me, and I have the pleasure of laying it before the reader in this volume. We took a turn to Rome and some other Italian cities, then to Munich, and thence to Paris, partly for exercise, but mainly because these things were in our projected program, and it was only right that we should be faithful to it. From Paris, I branched out and walked through Holland and Belgium, procuring an occasional lift by rail or canal when tired, and I had a tolerably good time of it by and large. I worked Spain and other regions through agents to save time and shoe leather. We crossed to England and then made the homeward passage in the Cunarder Gallia, a very fine ship. I was glad to get home, immeasurably glad, so glad, in fact, that it did not seem possible that anything could ever get me out of the country again. I had not enjoyed a pleasure abroad which seemed to me to compare with the pleasure I felt in seeing New York Harbor again. Europe has many advantages which we have not, but they do not compensate for a good many still more valuable ones which exist nowhere but in our own country. Then we are such a homeless lot when we are over there. So are Europeans themselves, for that matter. They live in dark and chilly vast tombs, costly enough maybe, but without conveniences. To be condemned to live as the average European family lives would make life a pretty heavy burden to the average American family. On the whole, I think that short visits to Europe are better for us than long ones. The former preserve us from becoming Europeanized, they keep our pride of country intact, and at the same time they intensify our affection for our country and our people, whereas long visits have the effect of dulling those feelings, at least in the majority of cases. I think that one who mixes much with Americans long resident abroad must arrive at this conclusion. Appendix. Nothing gives such weight and dignity to a book as an appendix. Herodotus. Appendix A. The Portio. Omar Khayyam, the poet-prophet of Persia, writing more than 800 years ago, has said, "In the four parts of the earth are many that are able to write learned books, many that are able to lead armies, and many also that are able to govern kingdoms and empires. But few there be that can keep a hotel." A word about the European hotel portier. He is a most admirable invention, a most valuable convenience. He always wears a conspicuous uniform. He can always be found when he is wanted, for he sticks closely to his post at the front door. He is as polite as a duke. He speaks from 4 to 10 languages. He is your surest help and refuge in time of trouble or perplexity. He is not the clerk. He is not the landlord. He ranks above the clerk and represents the landlord, who is seldom seen. Instead of going to the clerk for information, as we do at home, you go to the portier. It is the pride of our average hotel clerk to know nothing whatever. It is the pride of the portier to know everything. You ask the portier at what hours the trains leave. He tells you instantly. Or you ask him who is the best physician in town, or what is the hack tariff, or how many children the mayor has, or what days the galleries are open, and whether a permit is required, and where you are to get it, and what you must pay for it, or when the theaters open and close, what the plays are to be, and the price of seats, or what is the newest thing in hats, or how the bills of mortality. Average, or who struck Billy Patterson. It does not matter what you ask him. In 9 cases out of 10 he knows, and in the 10th case, he will find out for you before you can turn around 3 times. There is nothing he will not put his hand to. Suppose you tell him you wish to go from Hamburg to Peking by the way of Jericho, and are ignorant of routes and prices. The next morning he will hand you a piece of paper with the whole thing worked out on it to the last detail. Before you have been long on European soil, you find yourself still saying you are relying on Providence, but when you come to look closer you will see that in reality you are relying on the portier. He discovers what is puzzling you, or what is troubling you, or what your need is, before you can get the half of it out, and he promptly says, "Leave that to me." Consequently, you easily drift into the habit of leaving everything to him. There is a certain embarrassment about applying to the average American hotel clerk, a certain hesitancy, a sense of insecurity against rebuff, but you feel no embarrassment in your intercourse with the portier. He receives your propositions with an enthusiasm which cheers, and plunges into their accomplishment with an alacrity which almost inebriates. The more requirements you can pile upon him, the better he likes it. Of course, the result is that you cease from doing anything for yourself. He calls a hack when you want one, puts you into it, tells the driver whither to take you, receives you like a long-lost child when you return, sends you about your business, does all the quarreling with the hackman himself, and pays him his money out of his own pocket. He sends for your theater tickets and pays for them. He sends for any possible article you can require, be it a doctor, an elephant, or a postage stamp. And when you leave, at last, you will find a subordinate seated with the cab driver who will put you in your railway compartment, buy your tickets, have your baggage weighed, bring you the printed tags, and tell you everything is in your bill and paid for. At home, you get such elaborate, excellent, and willing service as this only in the best hotels of our large cities, but in Europe, you get it in the mere back country towns just as well. What is the secret of the portier's devotion? It is very simple. He gets fees and no salary. His fee is pretty closely regulated, too. If you stay a week, you give him 5 marks, $1.25, or about 18 cents a day. If you stay a month, you reduce this average somewhat. If you stay 2 or 3 months or longer, you cut it down half or even more than half. If you stay only 1 day, you give the portier a mark. The head waiter's fee is a shade less than the portier's. The boots, who not only blacks your boots and brushes your clothes, but is usually the porter and handles your baggage, gets a somewhat smaller fee than the head waiter. The chambermaid's fee ranks below that of the boots. You fee only these 4 and no one else. A German gentleman told me that when he remained a week in a hotel, he gave the portier 5 marks, the head waiter 4, the boots 3, and the chambermaid 2, and if he stayed 3 months, he divided 90 marks among them in about the above proportions. 90 marks make $22, $50. None of these fees are ever paid until you leave the hotel, though it be a year, except one of these 4 servants should go away in the meantime. In that case, he will be sure to come and bid you goodbye and give you the opportunity to pay him what is fairly coming to him. It is considered very bad policy to fee a servant while you are still to remain longer in the hotel, because if you gave him too little, he might neglect you afterward, and if you gave him too much, he might neglect somebody else to attend to you. It is considered best to keep his expectations on a string until your stay is concluded. I do not know whether hotel servants in New York get any wages or not, but I do know that in some of the hotels there, the feeing system in vogue is a heavy burden. The waiter expects a quarter at breakfast and gets it. You have a different waiter at luncheon, and so he gets a quarter. Your waiter at dinner is another stranger, consequently he gets a quarter. The boy who carries your satchel to your room and lights your gas fumbles around and hangs around significantly, and you fee him to get rid of him. Now you may ring for ice water, and 10 minutes later for a lemonade, and 10 minutes afterward for a cigar, and by for a newspaper, and what is the result? Why, a new boy has appeared every time and fooled and fumbled around until you have paid him something. Suppose you boldly put your foot down and say, it is the hotel's business to pay its servants. You will have to ring your bell 10 or 15 times before you get a servant there, and when he goes off to fill your order, you will grow old and infirm before you see him again. You may struggle nobly for 24 hours, maybe, if you are an adamantine sort of person, but in the meantime you will have been so wretchedly served, and so insolently, that you will haul down your colors and go to impoverishing yourself with fees. It seems to me that it would be a happy idea to import the European feeing system into America. I believe it would result in getting even the bells of the Philadelphia hotels answered and cheerful service rendered. The greatest American hotels keep a number of clerks and a cashier, and pay them salaries which mount up to a considerable total in the course of a year. The great continental hotels keep a cashier on a trifling salary and a portier who pays the hotel a salary. By the latter system, both the hotel and the public save money and are better served than by our system. One of our consuls told me that a portier of a great Berlin hotel paid $5,000 a year for his position, and yet cleared $6,000 for himself. The position of portier in the chief hotels of Saratoga, Long Branch, New York, and similar centers of resort would be one which the holder could afford to pay even more than $5,000 for, perhaps. When we borrowed the feeing fashion from Europe a dozen years ago, the salary system ought to have been discontinued, of course. We might make this correction now, I should think, and we might add the portier, too. Since I first began to study the portier, I have had opportunities to observe him in the chief cities of Germany, Switzerland, and Italy, and the more I have seen of him, the more I have wished that he might be adopted in America and become there, as he is in Europe, the stranger's guardian angel. Yes, what was true 800 years ago is just as true today. Few there be that can keep a hotel. Perhaps it is because the landlords and their subordinates have in too many cases taken up their trade without first learning it. In Europe, the trade of hotel keeper is taught. The apprentice begins at the bottom of the ladder and masters the several grades one after the other. Just as in our country printing offices, the apprentice first learns how to sweep out and bring water, then learns to roll, then to sort pie, then to set type, and finally rounds and completes his education with job work and press work. So the landlord apprentice serves as coal boy, then as underwaiter, then as a parlor waiter, then as head waiter, in which position he often has to make out all the bills, then as clerk or cashier, then as portier. His trade is learned now, and by he will assume the style and dignity of landlord and be found conducting a hotel of his own. Now in Europe, the same as in America, when a man has kept a hotel so thoroughly well during a number of years as to give it a great reputation, he has his reward. He can live prosperously on that reputation. He can let his hotel run down to the last degree of shabbiness and yet have it full of people all the time. For instance, there is the Hotel de Ville in Milan. It swarms with mice and fleas, and if the rest of the world were destroyed, it could furnish dirt enough to start another one with. The food would create an insurrection in a poorhouse, and yet if you go outside to get your meals, that hotel makes up its loss by overcharging you on all sorts of trifles, and without making any denials or excuses about it either. But the Hotel de Ville's old excellent reputation still keeps its dreary rooms crowded with travelers who would be elsewhere if they had only some wise friend to warn them. Appendix B. Heidelberg Castle. Heidelberg Castle must have been very beautiful before the French battered and bruised and scorched it 200 years ago. The stone is brown with a pinkish tint and does not seem to stain easily. The dainty and elaborate ornamentation upon its two chief fronts is as delicately carved as if it had been intended for the interior of a drawing room rather than for the outside of a house. Many fruit and flower clusters, human heads and grim projecting lions' heads are still as perfect in every detail as if they were new. But the statues which are ranked between the windows have suffered. These are life-size statues of old-time emperors, electors, and similar grandees, clad in mail and bearing ponderous swords. Some have lost an arm, some a head, and one poor fellow is chopped off at the middle. There is a saying that if a stranger will pass over the drawbridge and walk across the court to the castle front without saying anything, he can make a wish and it will be fulfilled. But they say that the truth of this thing has never had a chance to be proved, for the reason that before any stranger can walk from the drawbridge to the appointed place, the beauty of the palace front will extort an exclamation of delight from him. A ruin must be rightly situated to be effective. This one could not have been better placed. It stands upon a commanding elevation. It is buried in green woods. There is no level ground about it, but on the contrary, there are wooded terraces upon terraces, and one looks down through shining leaves into profound chasms and abysses where twilight reigns and the sun cannot intrude. Nature knows how to garnish a ruin to get the best effect. One of these old towers is split down the middle, and one half has tumbled aside. It tumbled in such a way as to establish itself in a picturesque attitude. Then all it lacked was a fitting drapery, and nature has furnished that. She has robed the rugged mass in flowers and verdure and made it a charm to the eye. The standing half exposes its arched and cavernous rooms to you, like open, toothless mouths. There, too, the vines and flowers have done their work of grace. The rear portion of the tower has not been neglected, either, but is clothed with a clinging garment of polished ivy which hides the wounds and stains of time. Even the top is not left bare, but is crowned with a flourishing group of trees and shrubs. Misfortune has done for this old tower what it has done for the human character sometimes, improved it. A gentleman remarked one day that it might have been fine to live in the castle in the day of its prime, but that we had one advantage which its vanished inhabitants lacked, the advantage of having a charming ruin to visit and muse over. But that was a hasty idea. Those people had the advantage of us. They had the fine castle to live in, and they could cross the Rhine Valley and muse over the stately ruin of trifles besides. The trifles people, in their day, 500 years ago, could go and muse over majestic ruins that have vanished now to the last stone. There have always been ruins, no doubt, and there have always been pensive people to sigh over them, and asses to scratch upon them their names and the important date of their visit. Within 100 years after Adam left Eden, the guide probably gave the usual general flourish with his hand and said, "Place where the animals were named, ladies and gentlemen, place where the tree of the forbidden fruit stood, exact spot where Adam and Eve first met, and here, ladies and gentlemen, adorned and hallowed by the names and addresses of 3 generations of tourists, we have the crumbling remains of Cain's altar, fine old ruin." Then, no doubt, he taxed them a shekel apiece and let them go. An illumination of Heidelberg Castle is one of the sights of Europe. The castle's picturesque shape, its commanding situation midway up the steep and wooded mountainside, its vast size, these features combine to make an illumination a most effective spectacle. It is necessarily an expensive show, and consequently rather infrequent. Therefore, whenever one of these exhibitions is to take place, the news goes about in the papers, and Heidelberg is sure to be full of people on that night. I and my agent had one of these opportunities and improved it. About 7:30 on the appointed evening, we crossed the lower bridge with some American students in a pouring rain and started up the road which borders the Nunheim side of the river. This roadway was densely packed with carriages and foot passengers, the former of all ages and the latter of all ages and both sexes. This black and solid mass was struggling painfully onward, through the slop, the darkness, and the deluge. We waded along for 3/4 of a mile, and finally took up a position in an unsheltered beer garden directly opposite the castle. We could not see the castle or anything else, for that matter, but we could dimly discern the outlines of the mountain over the way, through the pervading blackness, and knew whereabouts the castle was located. We stood on one of the 100 benches in the garden, under our umbrellas. The other 99 were occupied by standing men and women, and they also had umbrellas. All the region round about, and up and down the river road, was a dense wilderness of humanity hidden under an unbroken pavement of carriage tops and umbrellas. Thus we stood during 2 drenching hours. No rain fell on my head, but the converging whalebone points of a dozen neighboring umbrellas poured little cooling steams of water down my neck, and sometimes into my ears, and thus kept me from getting hot and impatient. I had the rheumatism, too, and had heard that this was good for it. Afterward, however, I was led to believe that the water treatment is not good for rheumatism. There were even little girls in that dreadful place. A man held one in his arms, just in front of me, for as much as an hour, with umbrella drippings soaking into her clothing all the time. In the circumstances, 2 hours was a good while for us to have to wait, but when the illumination did at last come, we felt repaid. It came unexpectedly, of course, things always do, that have been long looked and longed for. With a perfectly breathtaking suddenness, several massed sheaves of varicolored rockets were vomited skyward out of the black throats of the castle towers, accompanied by a thundering crash of sound, and instantly every detail of the prodigious ruin stood revealed against the mountainside, and glowing with an almost intolerable splendor of fire and color. For some little time the whole building was a blinding crimson mass. The towers continued to spout thick columns of rockets aloft, and overhead the sky was radiant with arrowy bolts which clove their way to the zenith, paused, curved gracefully downward, then burst into brilliant fountain sprays of richly colored sparks. The red fires died slowly down within the castle, and presently the shell grew nearly black outside. The angry glare that shone out through the broken arches and innumerable sashless windows now reproduced the aspect which the castle must have borne in the old time when the French spoilers saw the monster bonfire which they had made their fading and spoiling toward extinction. While we still gazed and enjoyed, the ruin was suddenly enveloped in rolling and rumbling volumes of vaporous green fire, then in dazzling purple ones, then a mixture of many colors followed, then drowned the great fabric in its blended splendors. Meantime the nearest bridge had been illuminated, and from several rafts anchored in the river, meteor showers of rockets, Roman candles, bombs, serpents, and Catharine wheels were being discharged in wasteful profusion into the sky, a marvelous sight indeed to a person as little used to such spectacles as I was. For a while the whole region about us seemed as bright as day, and yet the rain was falling in torrents all the time. The evening's entertainment presently closed, and we joined the innumerable caravan of half-drowned strangers and waded home again. The castle grounds are very ample and very beautiful, and as they join the hotel grounds, with no fences to climb, but only some nobly shaded stone stairways to descend, we spent a part of nearly every day in idling through their smooth walks and leafy groves. There was an attractive spot among the trees where were a great many wooden tables and benches, and there one could sit in the shade and pretend to sip at his foamy beaker of beer while he inspected the crowd. I say pretend because I only pretended to sip without really sipping. That is the polite way, but when you are ready to go, you empty the beaker at a draught. There was a brass band, and it furnished excellent music every afternoon. Sometimes so many people came that every seat was occupied, every table filled. And never a rough in the assemblage, all nicely dressed fathers and mothers, young gentlemen and ladies and children, and plenty of university students and glittering officers, with here and there a gray professor or a peaceful old lady with her knitting, and always a sprinkling of gawky foreigners. Everybody had his glass of beer before him, or his cup of coffee, or his bottle of wine, or his hot cutlet and potatoes. Young ladies chatted, or fanned themselves, or wrought at their crocheting or embroidering. The students fed sugar to their dogs, or discussed duels, or illustrated new fencing tricks with their little canes, and everywhere was comfort and enjoyment, and everywhere peace and goodwill to men. The trees were jubilant with birds, and the paths with rollicking children. One could have a seat in that place and plenty of music, any afternoon, for about 8 cents, or a family ticket for the season for $2. For a change, when you wanted one, you could stroll to the castle and burrow among its dungeons, or climb about its ruined towers, or visit its interior shows. The Great Heidelberg Tun, for instance. Everybody has heard of the Great Heidelberg Tun, and most people have seen it, no doubt. It is a wine cask as big as a cottage, and some traditions say it holds 18,000 bottles, and other traditions say it holds 1,800 million barrels. I think it likely that one of these statements is a mistake, and the other is a lie. However, the mere matter of capacity is a thing of no sort of consequence, since the cask is empty, and indeed has always been empty, history says. An empty cask the size of a cathedral could excite but little emotion in me. I do not see any wisdom in building a monster cask to hoard up emptiness in, when you can get a better quality, outside, any day, free of expense. What could this cask have been built for? The more one studies over that, the more uncertain and unhappy he becomes. Some historians say that 30 couples, some say 30,000 couples, can dance on the head of this cask at the same time. Even this does not seem to me to account for the building of it. It does not even throw light on it. A profound and scholarly Englishman, a specialist, who had made the Great Heidelberg Tun his sole study for 15 years, told me he had at last satisfied himself that the ancients built it to make German cream in. He said that the average German cow yielded from 1 to 2.5 teaspoons of milk, when she was not worked in the plow or the hay wagon more than 18 or 19 hours a day. This milk was very sweet and good, and a beautiful transparent bluish tint, but in order to get cream from it in the most economical way, a peculiar process was necessary. Now he believed that the habit of the ancients was to collect several milkings in a teacup, pour it into the great tun, fill up with water, and then skim off the cream from time to time as the needs of the German Empire demanded. This began to look reasonable. It certainly began to account for the German cream which I had encountered and marveled over in so many hotels and restaurants. But a thought struck me. Why did not each ancient dairyman take his own teacup of milk and his own cask of water and mix them without making a government matter of it? Where could he get a cask large enough to contain the right proportion of water? Very true, it was plain that the Englishman had studied the matter from all sides. Still, I thought I might catch him on one point, so I asked him why the modern empire did not make the nation's cream in the Heidelberg Tun, instead of leaving it to rot away unused. But he answered as one prepared. A patient and diligent examination of the modern German cream had satisfied me that they do not use the great tun now because they have got a bigger one hid away somewhere. Either that is the case, or they empty the spring milkings into the mountain torrents and then skim the Rhine all summer. There is a museum of antiquities in the castle, and among its most treasured relics are ancient manuscripts connected with German history. There are hundreds of these, and their dates stretch back through many centuries. One of them is a decree signed and sealed by the hand of a successor of Charlemagne in the year 896. A signature made by a hand which vanished out of this life near 1,000 years ago is a more impressive thing than even a ruined castle. Luther's wedding ring was shown me, also a fork belonging to a time anterior to our era and an early bootjack. And there was a plaster cast of the head of a man who was assassinated about 60 years ago. The stab wounds in the face were duplicated with unpleasant fidelity. 1 or 2 real hairs still remained sticking in the eyebrows of the cast. That trifle seemed to almost change the counterfeit into a corpse. There are many aged portraits, some valuable, some worthless, some of great interest, some of none at all. I bought a couple, one a gorgeous duke of the olden time, and the other a comely blue-eyed damsel, a princess maybe. I bought them to start a portrait gallery of my ancestors with. I paid $1.50 for the duke and $1.50 for the princess. One can lay in ancestors at even cheaper rates than these in Europe if he will mouse among old picture shops and look out for chances. Appendix C. The College Prison. It seems that the student may break a good many of the public laws without having to answer to the public authorities. His case must come before the university for trial and punishment. If a policeman catches him in an unlawful act and proceeds to arrest him, The offender proclaims that he is a student and perhaps shows his matriculation card, whereupon the officer asks for his address, then goes his way and reports the matter at headquarters. If the offense is one over which the city has no jurisdiction, the authorities report the case officially to the university and give themselves no further concern about it. The university courts send for the student, listen to the evidence, and pronounce judgment. The punishment usually inflicted is imprisonment in the university prison. As I understand it, a student's case is often tried without his being present at all. Then something like this happens. A constable in the service of the university visits the lodgings of the said student, knocks, is invited to come in, does so, and says politely, "If you please, I am here to conduct you to prison." "Ah," says the student, "I was not expecting it. What have I been doing?" "2 weeks ago, the public peace had the honor to be disturbed by you." "It is true, I had forgotten it. Very well, I have been complained of, tried, and found guilty. Is that it?" "Exactly. You are sentenced to 2 days solitary confinement in the college prison, and I am sent to fetch you." Student, "Oh, I can't go today."